whispers around, if you read the international news, are we heading for a recession? The paper today, the international watchdog, warns of a debt crisis, that debt ratios have reached excessive levels. I want to talk, let's start with Grant Robertson on this. What's your point of view?
If things keep going in the direction they are, it's possible. The Reserve Bank governor said last week there were two things. One was El Nino, which over the summer, NIWA are telling us there's a 90% chance we're going to get that. If that lasts for a decent length of time, and the
so you don't want to talk the economy down.
And the Chinese economy slows down, then the conditions are there for recession. Of course, I don't want a recession, but there's no point sticking your head in the sand and pretending that the economy is going gangbusters when it isn't, and it's not.
Okay, so Matiria, is the economy in New Zealand driven by a safe pair of hands?
Oh, hell no. Hell no. Clearly under National, the economy has been suffering from a lack of investment in the right infrastructure, a lack of investment in families, and a huge investment in private corporates and in the wealthy. And that is why we're seeing the significant rise in child poverty, 305,000 kids in child poverty,
you know what?
And the risk now of going back into recession if we're not careful.
Isn't it? I mean, just think of what happened since this show started. We started here in this pub of May of 2008, 8 years ago. Since then, extraordinary crises have hit both the world and Aotearoa, particularly the Christchurch earthquake. So we are in a safe pair of hands,
no,
surely.
we have increasing rates of child poverty. Child poverty has increased by 45,000 New Zealand children in the last 18 months. No, that is a crisis. We have families who can't buy their own homes because there is a housing crisis. And this government has not done anything about those two major issues that affect families every day.
You would have seen that in Christchurch, child poverty. What would you say to Matiria?
Well, I think first to say, Wallace, my background is mental health. I'm no economic expert, but that hasn't stopped Grant and Materia before. So when you look at Salvation Army's State of the Nation report, they said this year that actually child poverty and the amount of people presenting to food banks was tracking downwards. The reason for that was job creation. We've created 190,000 jobs in the last 4 years.
What sort of jobs?
And 150,000.
What sort of jobs?
Well, let's look at workforce participation, the highest ever at around 69%. And the average hours worked has increased as well. So you can look at a range of metrics across an economy, but what we've got is a very resilient economy. That's the envy of Australia and the rest of the world, and that should be celebrated.
Why do you speak to that, Grant Robertson? Because that is the truth, isn't it? It is the envy of the world. They look at New Zealand, they look at John Key, and they do see that safe pair of hands. Yes, they do.
Look, everybody acknowledges that the Canterbury earthquakes were a terrible thing, and they did damage the economy for a period of time. But the reality is that actually the rebuild of Canterbury has been propping up growth in New Zealand for the last 2 or 3 years, making up about a third of growth.
Yeah.
We can't actually go on relying on natural disasters and one product selling to one market.
Yeah.
If we actually want a proper growing economy, we diversify, we invest in the regions. That's not what this government is doing.
That's what needs to happen now. That's right, Grant's right. And what needs to happen now to make sure we don't go into recession is that there is investment in building new homes, there is investment in regional economic development so that we help to get rid of the trough that
what would you
could
both
be coming.
do? The official cash rate, it's low. It's at a real, extraordinary low. That means that people
Do you know actually, Wallace, it's not relative to the rest of the world?
No,
I mean, the rest of the world,
I know that, but
rates
here,
went up here last year,
yes.
and rates went up last year in New Zealand against the trend in the rest of the world. So while they're low historically, they're not low relative to the rest of the world.
But what it does to people in the housing market, particularly Auckland, I guess, is it pumps up that housing market. It says to people, yes, I can buy that extraordinary high house. It just pumps up that
And that's
sector.
the huge dilemma the Reserve Bank governor's got, because he doesn't want to pour more petrol on the Auckland housing fire, but if he's going to stimulate the economy that's stuttering, he has the tool of lowering interest rates. Because Nationals failed to do anything in housing, he has
the
to do
Reserve
that.
Bank's already come out, predicted over the next 3 years 2.5% GDP growth. And when you look at that, we are the envy of the rest of the world. That's great for New Zealanders, resilience and vibrancy, and that should be celebrated. And it's great to see, because of that, we can invest $15 billion into my hometown, my home region, the best rugby region in the world, and rebuild the best city in the world.
We'll come back to you, Matt Ducey. Let's go to Damien.
Thank you, Wallace. My next guest is a man that lives and breathes economics so much, he told me just before the show, he's actually got a supply and demand graph tattooed on his bum. This is John from NZIER. Hello.
Good evening. How are you?
Welcome along. Hey, the New Zealand, we've heard this phrase, rock star economy. As far as the health of this rock star goes, is it Taylor Swift or Keith Richards right now?
I think it's a little bit more moderate. It's a bit of an Adele or perhaps an Ed Sheeran. Just not gentle, not too exciting, but nothing too much to be worried about.
Okay, that's good to know. How much influence can the government have? We heard Malcolm Turnbull saying he really admired John Key's handling of the economy. How much influence can a government have over the economy?
Ultimately, the decisions are made by businesses, but certainly politicians have a good role in setting the framework so that businesses can operate. I think that this national government has done a pretty good job of getting the fiscal books back into shape, and now that allows us to look towards the future. And that's what Australia is jealous of, because their fiscal books are an absolute mess.
In terms of the wider economy, rather than just government spending, conservative governments tend to be quite hands-off. Has that been the case here?
I think that's largely been the approach, which is let's let businesses make the decisions rather than try and tell them what to do. And I think we're seeing solid growth, 2.5%. It's not that exciting, but it's not too bad either, considering all the shocks we've been through.
Can anyone, can Andrew Little, can Grant Robertson, can anyone talk the economy into recession?
Oh, look, I think businesses react to what's in front of them. I'm not sure businesses are dictated by what politicians say or don't say. Ultimately, they just get on with making decisions based on what's in front of them.
Just finally, some news overnight. Fonterra, the global milk price up about 16%. Is that positive? Is that a good thing? Have we turned the corner?
I think it's certainly a positive thing. We want to see a few more increases yet before farmers will feel comfortable, but it's a step in the right direction at least.
Well, thank you very much for your time, John.
All right, I want to come back. I want to talk about that. You briefly mentioned wages. What is in the 30-year picture or 20-year picture of Aotearoa Grant Robertson? How would Labour grow wages in New Zealand?
It takes a host of things. The first is to get industries growing that are high wage ones. So, the national government loves celebrating tourism. That's a good thing. But actually, tourism doesn't produce high wage jobs. We need to be in ICT, high value manufacturing,
and they're
places
not doing
where we'll
that,
go.
and they're not doing that.
But that's not the end of the story, Wallace, because that's part of it. But the other part of it is that actually wages in New Zealand have been depressed for a long time, and part of that is because we actually need stronger rights for workers to bargain collectively, actually be able to make their voices heard.
So joining the union, Matt, that's the answer perhaps. Joining the strong union, get that strong collective bargaining going.
Yeah, I'd probably disagree with that. What I'd say is we need to gauge with international markets. We need to make sure our workforce is capable, and by investing into them, we can invest into a range of industries. Look at ICT, look at manufacturing. It's expanded month on, month out for 36 months.
But that hasn't, though. Our manufacturing over time, over the last 30 years, since the 80s, has really suffered. What are you hearing when you hear Matt Ducey, Matiria? What do you think of that?
It's 20th century thinking. So, we have this amazing opportunity for a transformative economy based on new sustainable industries. Even things like the solar industry could be enormously driven by government putting in the right legislation. Gareth Hughes has a bill before Parliament that would put solar on a more equal footing, so when people put solar on their homes, they can sell it back to the grid for a decent price that builds the solar industry in New Zealand and reduces power bills for families. That's the kind of investment we need government to be supporting.
Do you support that kind of thing?
No, not at all. I mean, look at solar and the tariff payback. The reason it was 7 cents, it only costs us 4% per unit of energy. We're 80% renewable. One of the top countries, about the top 6 in the world. So, putting solar grids on top of our houses is not going to drive our economy forward.
It will. It creates jobs. And we know it creates jobs. It also creates new technologies that New Zealand can sell overseas and be part of the billion-dollar solar industry overseas.
What's your thoughts on that at Backbenchers TV? Coming soon, we're talking about the gender pay gap and women's rights, and also outdoor smoking. Should we ban outdoor areas and more? Stay with us. Back soon.